The grand hall sparkled with golden light. Chandeliers hung majestically from the ceiling, casting shimmering reflections on champagne glasses and the expensive jewelry adorning the guests. Henry Wallace, a wealthy oil tycoon and a prominent figure in high society, hosted the event that night. It was the kind of gathering that drew the richest and most influential people in the country. Wallace relished these soirees, not for the company, but because they allowed him to flaunt his power and amuse himself at the expense of others. In the shadows of this glittering world, Amara, a 25-year-old black waitress, navigated the room, carrying a tray of champagne glasses. Dressed in a pristine but modest uniform, her movements were precise and silent, the product of years of working odd jobs. Amara didn't belong in this setting, but she had no choice. She had grown up in a modest neighborhood where a battered old piano stood proudly in her living room. Her father, a factory worker with a passion for music, had taught her how to play. Every evening, after long days of work, he would sit with her, teaching her how to pour her emotions into the black and white keys. Amara was a prodigy, her talent undeniable. But life had dealt her a harsh hand. After losing her parents, she had to abandon her dreams to care for her younger sister. That evening, as she tried to stay unnoticed, she felt someone's eyes on her. Henry Wallace, dressed in a custom-tailored suit, was watching her with a smug smile. His gaze was heavy with arrogance. Something about her presence irritated him. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity in her posture, the pride that refused to bow despite her circumstances. Wallace snapped his fingers. "You there," he called out loudly. Amara turned, balancing her tray. She approached him with calculated politeness. "Yes, sir," she replied in a calm tone. Wallace looked her up and down, a mocking smirk playing on his lips. "You look awfully serious for a waitress. Do you even know how to have fun?" Amara stayed silent, knowing better than to respond to provocation. Wallace gestured toward the grand piano that stood in the center of the room. "Do you know how to play?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm and challenge. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Guests turned to watch, their curiosity piqued. They knew Wallace's reputation for cruel humor. The entire room's attention was now on Amara. She hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a quiet anger she refused to show. "Yes, sir, I can play," she finally answered, her voice steady but firm. Wallace laughed loudly. "Well then, entertain us," he declared, stepping aside to give her room. The crowd chuckled, some whispering in anticipation. They expected her to embarrass herself. Amara felt the weight of their eyes, but decided to take the challenge head-on. She carefully set her tray down on a nearby table and walked toward the piano. The room fell strangely silent. Amara sat on the leather bench and placed her hands on the keys. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and remembered her father's lessons. Then she began to play. The first note rang out, cutting through the stillness like a blade. It was followed by a melody so hauntingly beautiful that it seemed to suspend time itself. This was no ordinary music, it was a story. A story of love, loss, struggle, and resilience. The audience, initially skeptical, was slowly drawn in. The richness of the melody, the precision of each note, and the raw emotion Amara infused into every chord captivated them. Some guests closed their eyes, lost in the music. Others stood frozen, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. Even Wallace, who had expected to laugh at her, stood motionless, arms crossed. A strange look flickered across his face, something between shock and admiration. Amara finished her performance with a final, lingering note that reverberated in the perfect silence of the hall. Then she stood, bowed modestly, and prepared to return to her work. But before she could leave, thunderous applause erupted. The guests, now on their feet, clapped with a fervor that echoed throughout the room. Wallace, too, seemed shaken. He tried to speak, but no words came out. What he had witnessed went beyond anything he had ever known. "Who taught you to play like that?" he finally asked, his voice quiet. Amara looked him straight in the eye. "Life, sir," she replied simply. That night, Amara was no longer invisible. She became the star of the evening, a living testament to how talent and resilience could rise above prejudice. Among the guests was a renowned patron of the arts who had been deeply moved by her performance. A few weeks later, she received a scholarship to attend a prestigious music conservatory, finally giving her the chance to chase her dreams. As for Wallace, he spent the rest of the night uncharacteristically silent. What he had witnessed stayed with him. This young woman he had tried to humiliate had, unknowingly, taught him a lesson he would never forget. Power, wealth, and social standing meant nothing in the face of true greatness, the kind that comes from talent, courage, and soul. Amara's journey didn't end there. She went on to achieve heights she had once thought impossible. But she never forgot that night or the lesson it had taught her. No one, not even a millionaire, could crush the power of a dream.